I would love to hear someone
Totally
telling me
true.
that my unique perspective matters all the time.
Totally true. I mean, yeah, like it is what it is, right? There's another cliche, but yeah, my creativity and my art has always been reflective of my personal life and the things that matter to me, whether that's mental health, mental well-being, physical well-being. I believe that you can really create your own reality that is still grounded, but you if you reflect on where you're putting your energies, there is room for change and for you to still function, um, but just with a little bit more passion and love, I guess.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of In Sync, Echoes Media's new podcast where we will be taking a step back, slowing down the grind, and really looking at why we do what we do. Echoes Media is a new multimedia platform that looks beyond the news cycle to bring you a deeper look into the information and news crowding our feeds. And within Sync, we aim to do the same thing, just with your everyday life. So, for this next half an hour, let's sit back, grab a cup of tea, and really try to get a glimpse of what happens when we decide to go outside the norm. Our first episode is so special because our guest today is someone whose work really embodies what Echoes Media and InSync stand for. Sravya Attaluri, an award-winning designer, illustrator, and art director, as well as the founder of Hello Color, which is a multidisciplinary studio combining brand strategy, storytelling, and design to drive social impact. She has collaborated with global brands, charities, and organizations on creative campaigns destigmatizing mental illness and promoting intersectional feminism and representation. Born in India, raised in Hong Kong, and currently based in London, Sravya is a truly global phenomenon. And she has created a space in her work that really straddles that intersection of creativity and well being. Sravya, we are so excited to have you with us here today because who knew two South Asian women talking about well being in the creative field? That doesn't happen very often.
I know, right? Thank you so much, Anmol, for having me. I'm truly honored and excited to chat with you.
Great. So let's just jump right into it. You're doing so much, you're touching so many different fields, you're touching so many different lives. But I think what we all really want to know is what gets you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about that a lot as well because obviously everyone has those days where you don't want to get out of bed. But I would say truly for me, it is my passion, and that is slightly unrelated to work as well. It truly is whatever project I'm currently working on, whether it is setting up my home or it's a new podcast or a client project. I dive into it fully and I put my passion there, and that's what I wake up um, feeling excitement for.
That is great to hear. I don't know a lot of people around me these days who are really feeling that passion and that excitement for their work. For most people, it's just the daily 9 to 5 grind. And especially in our cultures, I feel there's this idea of what is normal and what can be work. And so it's so lovely to see that someone like you is inspiring people to realize that their passion can be their work as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's, I know the world seems bleak sometimes, and you think that you have to focus on what's right in front of you, but I believe that you can really create your own reality that is still grounded, but you if you reflect on where you're putting your energies, there is room for change and for you to still function, um, but just with a little bit more passion and love, I guess.
I think what you said on reflecting is so interesting because I'm sure that process and getting to where you are must have been very emotional. And when I look at your work, there is so much emotion in your art, whether it's multimedia, whether it's graphic design. How do you deal with managing all of those emotions on an everyday basis?
Yeah, I would say art is the reason I'm able to deal. It's kind of the outlet, and that's without having a creative outlet, I don't know how I would process all of that emotions, let go of it, and like communicate it to other people. Like for all of these things, I need my creative outlets. And I know people have that in different ways, whether it's, exercise or music or writing. For me, that's truly art. So it's kind of a reflection of everything else that's going on in my life. Not necessarily like the art brings emotion. It's the other way around, where that's the final part of like life experience, where I reflect on what's going on in different aspects of my life, and I'm able to process it through my art.
Wow, that seems heavy for everyday work. Does that get exhausting at any point?
Yeah, definitely. It is heavy to constantly think about, psychology, my own emotions, draw upon my own experiences. But I've learned boundaries. Not every day needs to be, a therapy day. I kind of go around it the scientific method, or, what is the purpose of the current project I'm working on? Maybe it's educational. Maybe it's speaking about my lived experience. And I break it down into, okay, who is this project serving? Who is the end user? Because most of the time I'm working with clients. Even though I work on art projects, it is going somewhere. So I'm able to, I guess, when I'm creating art for myself and I post it on Instagram, that is truly like when I'm just expressing myself. For all the other projects I work on, I'm able to separate, I guess, my emotions rawly from the final outcome, because I guess I have separated art for expression and art for social impact and function.
Yeah, you talk about setting boundaries, and I think that really stuck with me because I've recently been exploring this, living in Pakistan, particularly with women, and I've realized that this process can be so difficult. And a lot of times, we grow up not understanding how to set those boundaries and not understanding how to take care of ourselves, and that can really impact our childhood view of things. So if you could tell your younger self one thing, knowing what you know right now, what would it be?
That I think it's okay to be different. And I know that this sounds so cliche, but that is what will set you apart, and that will make you a leader and not a follower, because you have a unique perspective, and that is really rare. Having a unique perspective on reality will help.
You know what? I love a cliche. I think cliches are there for a reason. Because a lot of times they're true, and sometimes we need to say them again and again because maybe that's what someone needs to hear. So I think we pull them down for no reason. I would love to hear someone
Totally
telling me that my unique perspective matters all the time.
Totally true. I mean, yeah, like it is what it is, right? There's another cliche, but yeah, like that, they have been saying it for a reason. And I think when I was younger, I wouldn't listen to them, probably because nobody told me they are real. So yeah, I think we need to take advice more seriously sometimes, especially when it's to do with our well-being, and also share it with others who are willing.
Yeah, definitely. And the word well-being is so interesting, right? It's become such a buzzword on social media these days. You're seeing all these things about, the intersection of well-being with this and that, and everyone wants to put it in their bio. And I mean, we're doing the same thing. We're talking about well-being. But that's because it's important, right? I'm glad people are realizing that.
Yeah, it really doesn't feel great when people are monetizing it, but I'm still glad that people are talking about it, and on a personal level, they are reflecting on their lives and looking at whether, they can do something different, to improve their well-being. It's not just, physical optimal health. There's much more. It's a wider conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm wondering how you straddle that line between creativity and well-being, because of course this is your work, right? And to a large extent you you do have to look at where what's selling. I'm sure in your collaborations, I'm sure there's guidelines that brands have. And then you have your own personal work, like you said, on the sides. How do you balance both of them? How do you bring them together?
Yeah, I think for me, my creativity and my art has always been reflective of my personal life and the things that matter to me, whether that's mental health, mental well-being, physical well-being. And my art kind of reflects that. And with well-being itself, I know it's such a broad term, which is why I needed to, check in with myself and understand which part of well-being am I truly passionate about. And for me, that was mental well-being, which is taking care of your mental health holistically, not just maybe taking medication or not just pulling yourself out of a depression, but it is like almost like physical well-being, right? It's not just treating yourself, but it's taking care of yourself. And so I wanted credibility, which is why I decided to study it on a further level, just, not just talking about well-being as an artist, not just advocating for it as an advocate or a content creator. I really wanted to understand and be at the forefront of research, which is why I started to do a master's in neuroscience. And yeah, I've almost completed that. So that's kind of how I've created my niche, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that you have a master's in neuroscience and you've also brought that to art, because I've noticed what happens with science sometimes is that it stops being accessible to the everyday person, and there's so much research going on and we're finding out all the right things, but an everyday person, it's almost as if they feel it's difficult to connect to these like long papers and academic jargon. And so art seems like such a good way to bring that to someone like me, for example, who doesn't have an expertise in neuroscience or doesn't really understand the academic side of that.
Yeah, and sometimes there can be a lot of misinformation, right? Like if a study makes it to mass media, let's say they find a study that sleeping 9 hours a day is really important. Sometimes, in mass media, they'll leave out the rest of the study, and we forget to ask the questions like, okay, who has this been done on? Men or women and children, or because it's different for every group. It's different for South Asians. It's different, for women who have other health issues. So all of these things get lost in translation, and by the time the study makes it into mass media, it's just been churned out as something that we can talk about, but it's not really reality. So I think, art definitely, I think the way I see it is art can illustrate literally some of the concepts. It can draw attention, and then hopefully, lead people to learning more.
I think that's such a great point you've raised about communities reacting to this differently. And I know you've lived in different places across the world, interacted with different communities, different intersections of identity. Have you felt that those influences have influenced the way you work differently? Has it reflected in your work that your environment has changed at all?
Yeah, 100%. I grew up in Hong Kong. I was raised in a South Asian household. All of these things, being back in Asia, there is more stigma. And, seeing that stigma, I felt more driven to talk about mental health and mental illness. But I didn't feel supported. And I was very lucky to, I guess, come to London and further pursue that, and I can justify it because I still go back and I'm still working to I guess address those concerns and contribute back to the societies that I belong to, but at the same time I need to make sure I'm in an environment that I can take care of my health, and also London, the UK is kind of at the forefront of research for mental health, and being here, I'm able to kind of also bring those concerns, to science, like studies that are concerned, that take into consideration South Asians or stigma, cultural competency. So I'm able to impact those conversations that are going on here, so that, when I take my learnings back, it has a bigger impact.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting way to look at it. I know so many people would, struggle to get out of those stigmas. And I think it's so inspiring that you've managed to use that as a way to push you forward and understand that you're not getting the help that you need. And so you need to put yourself in a better environment or work harder towards getting yourself what you need. So I think
Yeah,
that's really
and
cool.
for a long time I couldn't, right? It's a dream to come to London. For a very long time I couldn't, and I felt like I was trapped. But art really saved me at that point. And through art, I found a community of other people feeling the same way. And we started creating art together and putting on shows, and that allowed us to feel empowered. We then reached out to our local organizations, or, we also, my friends and I have different organizations that we've set up, obviously all of them with no funding, because you have to start somewhere. And, we decided to make ourselves feel empowered in the spaces that, allowed it, and created spaces for other people to come through, like art shows, very like community-led art shows and things, because I don't want people to feel like, okay, well, I can't change my environment, so there's nothing I can do, because there are outlets, right? And when I was much younger, before I fully became an artist, I would just use my paintings as an outlet, writing or film as an outlet, and that kept me going. And I was mindful of who I showed those to, because I know not everyone appreciates it. But the teachers or community members that appreciated it kind of made me feel like I'm not alone. So I think it's both. Finding an outlet if you obviously can't change your environment, which not a lot of people can, and that's totally fair. And the second is, if you are supporting someone through it, be a good, I guess, ally, be a good listener. So there's two sides to it.
Yeah, community support can matter so much, right? And I think people who don't always have that really understand the value of it. Like building up your own community can be so important for that journey of healing.
So true. Yeah. I mean, I think about that a lot. Like, why do I keep hosting community events, or, starting a community podcast, and you're so right. It's because I didn't have that support growing up. My journey, now it sounds like I've got it all together, but for the longest time, I was that person who, nobody understood. I struggle with my mental health. My community called me crazy. They pretty much shunned my parents. And it was like many dark years, right? And when I finally decided to advocate for it, it was still scary. But after years of doing it and having some successful projects, it's the same community that's, turned around and is now willing to listen to what I've gone through, and willing to hopefully support other people better than they supported me, and I so much want to help build that community, because you're right, like the people who know the value of not having it want to make sure it doesn't happen again, I would hope.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad there are people like that in this world, who are challenging those generational traumas, because that is what it is, right? A generational trauma that is passed down, often without us realizing. And I think because of that, so many people sort of shy away from taking the path that you've taken, because of all these stigmas, because of people calling them crazy, because of people saying, oh, what are they doing? What a shame. They're bringing shame to their parents. This child amounted to nothing. We had so many hopes for them. These are all slogans we've heard, and I'm sure they're common in different ways in communities across the globe. I don't think they're necessarily particular to South Asia alone, right?
No, definitely not. And, that comes whether it's, class or it's race or culture or, gender, we have these limitations and like preconceived notions. I think for me, it just got to a point where I knew that I couldn't not bring shame to the family, right? This is just who I am. Like, I struggle with my mental health. I don't see the world as other people see it. I would love to do my art, and that's the only thing that drives me. And therefore, that's kind of the only thing that will truly keep me alive. So, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it whether you support me or not, because I have to do this to be alive. That's the way I looked at it. And I mean, that itself comes with a lot of intergenerational trauma that I have to work through, because I then feel like, because if I'm not an engineer or a doctor or scientist, then I need to be the best in whatever I do, because it's not okay to just be, a subpar artist. Like, it's okay to just be an engineer, just be a doctor. You don't necessarily have to be, the world's best neurosurgeon. But to take that unique path, it feels like I do have to be, the best is best. But that is, again, intergenerational trauma that we then have to work through. And I think now people are having these conversations worldwide, so it makes it easier.
Yeah, but even though it's gotten better, I'm sure that pressure can be terrifying, in a world of 8 billion people, to be the best at something that's not often attainable for a lot of us. And we put these insane pressures on ourselves. Do you feel like that ever limits you? Does that create creative blocks? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think I can be, like, it's just impossible to be the best, right? And who defines the best? Even Olympics doesn't, to some extent, because just because you're physically really good at something doesn't mean that you are the best person. Or I think obviously it comes down to you validating yourself, which is a really deep healing and awareness to come to. But yeah, 100% I limit myself. I think I struggle with self-confidence. And I automatically cross myself off of a lot of opportunities because I feel like I'm not good enough. And I think it comes from comparing. So, to avoid creative blocks, I pretty much kind of don't follow too many of my peers. I will to support them, but not on an everyday basis, because it is quite toxic to constantly compare, and I'm only human. So of course, I haven't reached that state of awareness where, I don't compare, I guess, that level of maturity. And, I think I am very careful about where I spend my energy, so that I don't get into a rut. I don't get into like, low self-confidence. And on the creativity side, when I do have a creative block, I kind of switch up the medium. I go to museums, or even just look up online like art that inspires me, that is something that's completely different. I learn new skills. My master's is one example. And I try to do things that are completely different, because inspiration doesn't come from, the closest thing. It comes from, for me at least, the wildest ideas, and bringing together different aspects that I'm interested in, like nature, art, and mental health, or, women's health and nature, let's say. It's bringing together different aspects of my life. And that's where I find inspiration again. If I'm feeling like I've been in a silo, I've been comparing, I'm just stuck to my Instagram feed, then I know I have to put it down.
I'm glad you've understood what works for you and what doesn't. And in fact, I think I would disagree with you there. I think that is in itself a very high level of maturity, to understand that this is something that I can do and this is something that I can't do. And, learning to say no. We don't learn to say no. I think no is considered such a taboo word, particularly for women, I think, because we always have to be accommodating and we have to be pleasing. And
yeah,
so
I 100% struggle.
And so after everything you've shared, one thing that I would just love to end with is, what advice would you have for someone who who wants to take the same path as you, but is just scared, or is just scared to prioritize themselves in that way?
Yeah, I think, it's a big jump when you look at, an ideal solution, or this is where, the end result, this is where I want to be. And I think it's really important to start with baby steps. And sometimes that is starting with your mindset, changing your perception, and that itself will open up opportunities and perspectives.
I think that's great advice. And I think a great place to end today's conversation. Sravya, thank you so much for sharing
Yeah,
your
thank you so much
journey,
for
your
having me.
thoughts. It was lovely to have you. And for anyone who's listening, if you'd like to follow Sravya and for some reason you haven't come across her amazing work already, the links are in the bio for the podcast below. So you could have a look there. Please do look at her work. I would encourage everyone to look at what she's doing, follow her, and stay tuned for more brilliant conversations that help us see the world in a different way. Thank you so much.